exposing the propaganda and challenging you to use your brain. It's time to tap into the truth.
Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed time to tap into the truth. This is your host, Tim Tapp, coming to you live from historic Roane County, Tennessee. And tonight we are talking about the political theater. That is what a lot of folks are calling it, but the bottom line is Ted Cruz, even right now as we speak, it is 9:01 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on September 24th, 2013, and Ted Cruz is on the floor of the Senate defending his decision to try and help the House Republicans in defunding Obamacare. But before we get into that, I did want to go ahead and touch on one other thing. It's a topic that is near and dear to the show, and that is the fact that Barack Hussein Obama has guaranteed already that he fully intends on implementing the UN Arms Treaty. What's been announced officially at this point that John Kerry indeed does plan on signing the UN Arms Treaty, even though almost every senator has already stepped up and said, we're not going to pass this. Secretary of State John Kerry indeed does plan to sign a, quote, controversial UN treaty on arms regulations tomorrow. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, Wednesday of this week, tomorrow. A senior State Department official told Fox News, despite warnings from lawmakers that the Senate will not ratify the agreement. A state official said the treaty would reduce the risk that international transfers of conventional arms will be used to carry out the world's worst crimes, while protecting gun rights. Really? I don't see how that happens, but I also don't see where there's any credibility left in this particular argument, considering that Obama has exempted himself and this government from the laws against arming known terrorists. I mean, they make a statement on what they were planning on doing, and obviously what they were planning on doing has to be more than what they're announcing that they're planning on doing, because if it wasn't, there'd be no need for the exemption. And even now they're claiming what they're up to really wouldn't require the exemption. But you know what? I'm just continue to talk about this topic, and it just doesn't seem like very many people are understanding or getting it, and a lot of folks that I've talked to still don't even know what happened. I've been talking about this particular story now both on the air and online and through social media and on some other folks' shows, and I've been just going on about it, just kind of like what I'm doing right now, so forgive me, but people still don't seem to know exactly what it means or what's going on, and there's still some confusion about whether or not the law itself would have even applied, since the law talks about countries, nations, governments in particular, a multitude of times. But there are also those phrases within the law that says individuals that are known associates. And that's where the known al-Qaeda operatives in the Syrian arms are at risk. At any rate, U.S. lawmakers have long claimed that the treaty could lead to new gun control measures, and there's a reason why they say that. Jim Inhofe of Oklahoma, who, by the way, kudos, is right now on the Senate floor offering support to Ted Cruz in his current. It's not exactly a filibuster, but it certainly is, for all intents and purposes, the same thing. But he's making a stand, and he's making his point. We'll get back to that shortly. But thank you, Jim, for being there to support Ted Cruz in this. At any rate, Jim is one of the most vocal opponents of the treaty. He sent a letter to Kerry declaring it dead in the water since a majority of senators have gone on record against the agreement. And that includes Democratic senators, by the way. Of course, you can't get a majority without having at least some Democrats on board, considering that the Democrats control the Senate at the moment. At any rate, the administration is wasting precious time trying to sign away our laws to the global community and unelected UN bureaucrats, is a direct quote from the letter that Jim sent to Mr. Kerry. Now, Kerry, who is in New York attending the UN General Assembly session, announced earlier this year that the administration planned to sign the treaty. And again, once that announcement came out, I started going off on this show and the Blog Talk version about it. Check the archives if you're interested. The treaty would require countries that ratify it, which means it would not require countries that don't, to establish national regulations to control the transfer of conventional arms and components and to regulate arms brokers. But it would not explicitly control the domestic use of weapons in any country. Not explicitly, but would be used as a legal framework and as an excuse. Because here's the craziest thing about this particular ban. If you actually look at what they tell you it is, then it already exists. There are already laws, both international norms, as they like to call it, and in a majority of the civilized nations, individual national laws that do regulate and, in many cases, prohibit the sales of firearms of any kind into areas where the use would be questionable. So there's no need for this treaty, quite honestly, unless you, in fact, do want to use it as an excuse to create a dual legal framework to try and further jackhammer away at constitutional freedoms. At any rate, gun rights supporters on Capitol Hill warned that the treaty could be used as the basis for additional gun regulations inside the U.S. and have threatened not to ratify. Okay, well, I promise you I had not read the entire article at this point, but obviously there's some folks that agree with what I was saying. Over the summer, 130 members of Congress signed a letter to the occupier and to Kerry, urging them to reject the measure for this and other reasons. The chance of adoption by the U.S. is slim. A 2/3 majority would be needed in the Senate to ratify. What impact the treaty will have in curbing the estimated $60 billion global arms trade remains to be seen. The UN treaty will take effect after 50 countries ratify it, and a lot will depend on which ones ratify and which ones don't, and how stringently it is implemented. The Control Arms Coalition, which includes hundreds of non-governmental organizations in more than 100 countries that promoted the arms trade treaty, has said it expects many of the world's top arms exporters, including Britain, Germany, and France, to sign alongside emerging exporters such as Brazil and Mexico. It said the United States is expected to sign later this year. The coalition notes that more than 500,000 people are killed by armed violence every year, and predicated that history will be made when many UN members sign the treaty, which it says is designed to, quote, protect millions living in daily fear of armed violence and at risk of rape, assault, displacement, and death. Many violence-racked countries, including the Congo and South Sudan, are also expected to sign. The coalition said their signature and ratification will make it more difficult for illicit arms to cross borders. The treaty covers battle tanks, armored combat vehicles, large caliber artillery systems, combat aircraft, attack helicopters, warships, missiles, missile launchers, and small arms and light weapons. Small arms and light weapons, general term, covers a whole plethora of handheld, whether it's a revolver or a semi-automatic pistol. It certainly would cover a full auto. You know, it's pretty much a broad band, but, you know, we're talking about places where they can't control their borders anyway. So how is signing on to this going to stop something that they've already been trying to stop? Well, it prohibits states that ratify it from transferring conventional weapons, and if they violate arms embargoes or if they promote acts of genocide, crimes against humanity, or war crimes. The treaty also prohibits the export of controversial arms if they could be used in attacks on civilians or civilian buildings such as schools and hospitals. In addition, the treaty requires countries to make measures to prevent the diversion of conventional weapons to the illicit market. This is among the provisions that gun rights supporters in Congress are concerned about. Now, that, of course, is a lame excuse. There literally is nothing in this that is helpful towards stopping the proliferation of armed conflict in areas where gun running and gun smuggling takes place on a regular basis. It occurs to me that once again, the occupier provides proof positive that he is far more interested in protecting First Amendment rights for Al-Qaeda than he is providing Second Amendment rights for American citizens. Of course, you know, all in all, since he's determined to arm the Syrian rebels, obviously he's more concerned about guaranteeing the Second Amendment rights for Al-Qaeda as well. At any rate, let's take a quick break, and then when we come back, we are going to talk about Ted Cruz and what he is doing in this moment. And we're going to talk a little bit about why he's doing it, just in case there's any confusion, because this man is on a righteous crusade. He's doing the right thing, and I'll explain to you why. And, you know, just in case you don't agree with me, I'll cover a few topics here and there. And you know what? By the time it's done, maybe I'll change your mind. Maybe I won't. But either way, I think you'll have a better understanding of why Ted Cruz is deserving of respect for making this effort, whether you agree with his purpose or not. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Tap into the truth. Check us out at tapintothetruth.com for our latest blog posts and for links to all of our past broadcasts. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and to follow us on Twitter. That's Tap Into the Truth right here on Spreaker Radio.
Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen, right here on Spreaker. This is Tap Into the Truth. Thank you and welcome for being here. I do appreciate your participation, either through listening or being in the chat room or following the show. We have had a slight uptick in followers lately, and I'd like to thank everybody out there for clicking the follow button and helping us to both grow the show and help get the word spread out there. I appreciate everybody who has done that. Some of you have took to social media, Twitter in particular, and tweeted out the fact that you're following the show now. I appreciate that as well. And for those of you who are also hosts that have done so, I think you'll see that we have also followed back. We do that here. And also took to social media, and we're listening to some of the shows as well. And you know what? Ultimately, here at Spreaker, over at Blog Talk, there are a lot of great shows at both. And if you have the time and you just like listening to quality programming, you can spend some time, you can find some great shows, and I hope that you'll do that. In the meanwhile, let me go ahead and do a little bit of that shameless self-promotion I keep talking about. I want to invite you to go over to tapintothetruth.com, check out the videos, send us a message from there, check out the past episodes, check out the blog post, and check out Friends and Sponsors show page as well. Get a little opportunity to check out some folks that are friends of the show, whether it be teapartycommunity.com, patriotspace.com, lady-patriots.com. A lot of great folks out there that we've got good connections with and good relationships with. And they are very supportive, not only of just Tea Party politics, like Tea Party community, but ultimately they're supportive of conservative solutions to the real problems that we're facing out there. Also, I would like to ask you, if you have not already, please follow the show. Click the follow. It doesn't take long, and it does help the show. So if you like what you're hearing, or even if you don't like what you're hearing, I'd still ask you, please follow the show. Because sometimes you might find it informative, whether you agree with all of my opinions or not, when I editorialize. But beyond that, you might also occasionally find a point that you might want to, take with you to the water cooler talk the next day, what have you. And speaking of the water cooler talk the next day, let me tell you what happened today at my day job. Because there was a conversation, and we were talking about what's actually going to transpire. And the reason we had this discussion is because we had a girl that was working for the company that quit the day before. She left Monday evening, and she quit. The reason why she quit was because she'd gotten a letter from the state. Here in Tennessee, we have what's called TennCare, and it is a social insurance program that was initially primarily designed to help children in homes where the parents couldn't afford proper health care. When it was initially instituted under Don Sundquist, there was very little oversight on who got onto the programs and who didn't. And as a result, a lot of people got onto these programs that flat out shouldn't have been, including people from other states. If they were traveling through town, got involved in an accident, or got terribly sick and had to go to an emergency room, blah, 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 yakety smackety, whatever, they'd go to an emergency room, and the first order of business was, do you have insurance? If the answer was no, there was, here, fill this out. And at that point in time, almost everybody who filled out the paperwork got approved. Okay, you're on TennCare now. Yay! And what sense does that make for the Tennessee taxpayers to pay for health care for somebody from Alabama, Georgia, wherever? I don't know. But the point being is that with the new health care laws upcoming, if they do go into effect, TennCare slowly goes away. So this girl basically quit to try and keep a benefit that is going to be gone soon anyway. But ultimately, the problem still comes from the fact that the system, as it currently exists, encourages people not to work. Now, I don't know about you, but maybe I'm showing my age just a little bit, but I'm still from a point in time where there's pride in having a job and in doing a job and in doing it well. I don't want to sit back and collect a check for nothing. I want to earn what I have. And unfortunately, the way this system has been set up, whether you're talking about welfare, whether you're talking about food stamps even, it encourages you not to work. Oh, there's some places it's a little stricter than others about trying to verify that you're looking for work. But as far as actually getting the job and keeping it, well, that's a different story. And heaven help you if you should actually get a job, start working, and try to improve your situation, because you're going to be cut much quicker than your ability to make up for the loss. So the system's all whacked anyway. But as a result of us having this brief conversation about how silly it was for this lady to quit her job with our company, and in order to try to maintain this particular benefit, one of the gentlemen who has recently been onboarded at the company made the statement that he doesn't care what the Senate or what the White House or even the Supreme Court says. He just doesn't see where it's right that the government can tell us that we have to buy something or anything. He's made the statement that that's just downright un-American. And he's right. The individual mandate is unconstitutional. And before I hear any more people like Al Sharpton or whoever else wants to make the point, because it seems to have become a Politico talking point, the Supreme Court has ruled. Well, the Supreme Court ruled on a lot of different topics back through the day, and they don't always get it right. At one point in time, slavery was constitutional. The Supreme Court ruled. Does that mean they were right? No. It meant after a few folks actually took the time to put their political views aside and look at just the letter of the law and at just the Constitution, well, there's just certain things about it that's not there. And then there's the famous, ever so common excuse of, well, what about states requiring you to have insurance for your car? Well, see, here's the thing about that. Whether it should be or shouldn't, and that's a debate for a different time, you do not have a constitutional right to operate a motor vehicle. That's why states require you to have a license. That's why they're able to charge you for the license. It's almost the same argument with the same-sex marriage issue. We're not talking about true marriage. We're talking about state recognition of a civil union that provides certain tax, well, I was going to say tax benefits, but that's not always a benefit either. Lots of times we're actually talking about a tax status. It's better phrasing, a little more accurate. But ultimately, the difference between what the state decides it's going to acknowledge and the truth of your spiritual connection in your relationship has nothing to do with one another. Now, you do not have a constitutional right to operate a motor vehicle, so the state says, here's the conditions to get your license. And it's a little different in every state. So unfortunately, as long as driving a car remains a privilege, then the states are allowed to put any ridiculous caveats onto that privilege that they want. Right or wrong, that's something you have to take up at the state level. I, for one, still don't believe it's necessarily right, but it's also why they can do checkpoint searches, and it's not a violation of your right to privacy. I've had arguments with some folks in regards to that, especially some of my Tea Party friends who think your personal property, thinking in this case your car, you have the right to not be subject to unreasonable search and seizures. Well, when you're on your land, that is true. When you're in the public, your right to privacy and unreasonable search and seizures is compromised, for lack of a better word. And if you're in your vehicle, you're operating it, well, again, you get back to that the state is legally allowed to put any kind of little restrictions and conditions and caveats and put them in place that they want to in order for you to legally operate that motor vehicle. Is that right? I don't think so. I disagree with it vehemently. However, the legal precedent exists, and as long as that's the case, it's legitimate. Right or wrong, like it or not. And when it comes down to it, I will say this, I've said it several times recently, but just because you make something that's wrong legal, it doesn't make it right. And that's really what we have to strive for as a citizenry. We have to push to get things right. Now, in truth, there's so many things going on this past week and this week, it's been difficult to give adequate discussion time to any topic. And one of the things I say is that we're going to delve past the headlines. We really want to get to the heart of issues. And quite honestly, I could have upgraded this to a 2-hour show and been on every day this past week and every day last week and still not given a real, true, honest accounting for what's going on. But here is what we have to realize when it comes to Ted Cruz and what he's trying to do. Even still at this very minute, he's on the floor of the Senate. He swore an oath earlier today that he was going to stand and do this for as long as he physically could. And as of right now, and it is swiftly approaching 9:30 as it is 9:28 p.m. right now, he is standing up for you, the American people. He's standing up for you. He's standing up for me. He's standing up for my wife, my daughter. He's standing up for your children, for your mother, for everybody. And here's the reason why he's doing it. It's not so much about access to health care. Now, that's what you're being told. Now, chances are, if you're listening to this show and actually gotten this far into it and you're still listening, that it's probably a case of me preaching to the choir, so I don't really have to get into it. But on the off chance that you happen to be somebody that's kind of on the fence with this, or somebody that's on the other side of the political spectrum, but you're still a little undecided about Obamacare. Obamacare is strictly a power grab, plain and simple. It doesn't take a great deal of logic even to figure this out. You don't have to be a brain surgeon or a rocket scientist to realize that the promises that were made in selling this, or in the attempt to sell it, could never have been achieved with this. Making healthcare more affordable? Then why would you focus on insurance in the first place? Demanding insurance companies have to cover pre-existing conditions, and all policies have to include a wide variety of things instead of allowing customers to pick and choose what levels of coverage they wanted. But you do that without putting some type of ceiling in place, saying, okay, you have to do this, but you can't charge any more than X number of dollars when you sell this policy. What is that designed to do? They knew that would force private sector insurance companies to raise rates. And Anybody that's been in the market for private sector insurance knows that insurance rates have been going up steadily for the last several years without this type of bullying and government regulation. So what has happened? Exactly that. The rates, instead of a 5 to 8% increase like we had been seeing, have jumped to 20 to 30, and in some cases as much as 55% increases. But the whole thing was to force you into the exchanges instead of staying with companies that you already had. What were the promises? If you like your policy, you can keep it. If you like your doctor, you can stay with them. Lies. And they knew it. They knew these were lies because it's okay to lie when you're a liberal. When you're a so-called progressive, it's okay to lie to further the cause. That's part of why they like Muslims so much, I suppose. You know, the extremist ones, part of the tenet of Islam is it's okay to lie. It's okay to intentionally mislead the infidels as long as you're furthering the cause of Islam. Well, in this case, same ideology. The so-called progressives, and that I call them that just in case you haven't heard before if you're new to the show. True progressivism, if you were really a progressive, you would want the quality of life to improve. The so-called progressives, they just want to change things for the sake of changing them. And they want to rationalize and convince you that things are better. But Ted Cruz is on the floor right now trying to protect you from one of those progressions. If this thing gets fully implemented, there will be no taking it back. It just won't happen. There's certainly not enough votes to repeal it. And on October 1st, the exchange is open. You, the American citizen, then only have 3 months to have yourself insured or start paying penalties. And in truth, the way this law is written up, it certainly seems as if where the penalties are set up, and the fact that they are progressive penalties, which means you pay more the more times you're hit with this penalty. You pay so much this year. If you still are not insured by the end of next year, well, then you pay so much more again, and then you pay so much more again. And I think as the law sits right now, can always be adjusted, amended, and changed. Keep that in mind. But as it sits right now, they have a top-off that roughly is projected to cost about what the bronze plans are going to cost anyway. So for a lot of folks, the way it's set up right now, it almost would make more sense to just take the penalty. Except for the fact that you're not any better off than you are now, and if you were one of these fortunate folks that were getting refunds at the end of the year, that's where this penalty is going to come from. That's why the IRS was hired, and I say hired in this particular case, because they did indeed increase the number of IRS agents, strictly for the enforcement of Obamacare. This is going to be done along with your taxes. So, like I was saying, if you're one of the lucky people that normally gets a refund at the end of the year, if you're not insured, your penalty is going to be taken from what your refund would be. So, how do you feel about that? Why would they leave that as an option? If they, seriously, this is another question I want you to think about. This is use your brain time. If they really want to make sure that you're insured so that they can improve your accessibility to health care, why would they leave you an option to take a penalty? We're going to fine you. Only it's not a fine if it's in front of the Supreme Court. Then it's a tax. You're going to help pay for that. But what if you're making it such a low economic level that you think you're entitled to receive the supplemental assistance from the government? Because, see, here's another one of those nasty little lies. It's not free for anyone. If you are going to see if you can get a government subsidy to help you pay for your insurance, you have to fill out a small novel of paperwork in order to see if you're eligible. Now, the upside is you might possibly get enough of this government handout, I guess would be the best word for it. It's a new subsidy. It's a new benefit. You might possibly, after going through all this, find out that you are in an earning bracket, that you don't actually have to pay for yours. One of us contributors to society will end up having to pay more in our taxes to help cover your fees. Okay, fair enough. If you are actually economically that far down the totem pole, I don't have a problem. I do believe there needs to be a safety net. The problem still is that the government should not be the one instituting this. There are literally hundreds of churches in East Tennessee alone that help their membership and help people in their communities that don't even attend a service with medical bills, with food, and a variety of other things. Personal charity is the way these things should be solved, not through government enforcement. And we can argue left and right, up and down, all day long, every day of the week, if you want to, about what the role of government should be. But the bottom line is, the government is already in the pockets of most wage earners way too much already. One of the topics upcoming is going to be Nancy Pelosi's little statement, where she's out here trying to talk about the debt ceiling and why it's important that they raise it, and how, it's so terrible that the Republicans over there in the House are trying to hold the debt ceiling hostage over the defunding of Obamacare. She made the statement that there's nothing left to cut. Now, if you're one of these people that doesn't pay any attention to politics, well, then I'm surprised you're even listening to this show. But if you are somebody with half a brain and are at least paying attention to politics part of the time, then you know government wastes so much money every single day that it's hard to imagine that we'd ever get to a point that there's not anything more to cut from the budget. There is this big deal. I mean, whether you're talking about research grants to study the effects of marijuana on rats, I think it's going to make them stoned, or whatever else is going on. Literally, here's my message for Nana Pelosi. If the government is still spending any money at all anywhere, then there's still something that can be cut. Period. It's like our own budgets at home, ladies and gentlemen. If you're trying to cut an extra $20 out of your monthly budget, chances are, if you have a landline phone, it's gone. Boom. You cut it out. Now, you're not happy about it, but most of us have cell phones these days, independent of landline. In fact, a lot of folks don't even have landlines. So then where are you going to cut it from? Maybe you buy generic 2 liters instead of name brand drinks. Over the course of months in most households, that's usually $20 worth of savings. Well, you can find places to save money, and ultimately, even if the debt ceiling is not raised, which I'm pretty sure we all know they're going to, no matter how this Obamacare defunding thing turns out. But even if they didn't raise the debt ceiling, there are places to cut, places to save, and it doesn't mean disaster or the end of the world, especially for those of us that are dependent on government checks flowing into our hands. Those checks can still flow. If they stop, it's only because the executive branch, aka the occupier, Mr. Barack Hussein Obama himself, decided, or someone decided for him, that they weren't going to go out. It's not going to be because the debt ceiling wasn't raised. It's going to be because they decided they haven't found any spending they don't like, so they have to keep spending the money somewhere else. They deprioritized you. So, we know they're actually already out there saying this. Ooh, the Republicans are trying to keep your Social Security checks from getting to you. And you even have Republicans in the Senate that are attacking Ted Cruz for wanting to stand up and be heard. He's defending the wishes of his constituents, first and foremost, but he's also standing on principle. Even the Democrats have stood up and admitted, they've said it's on record, a multitude of them have described Obamacare as a train wreck. You want to know why you keep hearing people say that? Because that's what they said. It's the party that pushed it on you. But you know what? They're not overly concerned about protecting you from it because they have an exemption. Think about that. Again, I've already asked the question in a previous broadcast. If Obamacare is so great, If Obamacare is really so great, why aren't the senators the first people in line wanting it? Why are there so many other people wanting exemptions? Why are the labor unions so pissed off at the Democratic Party right now? Because they had a special meeting at the White House. They asked if they could get some extra government cash to cover the difference on what they were going to be paying in additional taxes to keep their, quote, Cadillac plans. And they were told, no. And if this was really about providing better health care to you, the average American citizen, I ask you, why did they give corporations their exemption? You know, the individual mandate still in place. Goes into effect October 1st. The corporate mandate has been postponed until after the next midterm election. Why? Because in order to try and garner additional support, these corporations are going to donate a little more money to Democratic candidates. If that exemption had not been extended, they might have donated all that money to conservative candidates, or at least Republican candidates claiming to be conservative. That's unfortunately not always an accurate assessment. It was about keeping their power. They exempt themselves, and then they cut a deal for big business so that hopefully they can get big donations. It doesn't sound to me like they have your best interest in mind. And in the meanwhile, Republicans are turning on Ted Cruz, providing, quote, opposition information to Fox News. And based on everything that I came across today, it looks like it might very well have been Mr. John McCain that was involved in a lot of that. Karl Rove is probably behind a lot of this too. Again, these are people that are telling us that trying to defund Obamacare is a train wreck for the Republican Party. We'll get blamed for shutting down the government. The last few times the government have been shut down, typically good things have come out of it, and it hasn't hurt the American people long term. I wish I had more time. Probably shouldn't have spent as much time talking about the UN Small Arms Treaty at the beginning of the show, but we're running out of time. I promise you we'll probably be talking about this again, and I hope that Ted Cruz can keep going all freaking night, and I hope somebody will come and help him cover, and I hope that the procedural tricks don't get past. We've got to take a stand, ladies and gentlemen, and Obamacare is not about health care. It's about another government grab. It's about further eroding constitutional liberties. We've got to take the steps to stop this process. If you don't believe me, then do your own research and then use your brain. Because don't take my word for it. Definitely don't take their word for it. And be prepared to dig a little bit deeper so that you can, in fact, tap into the truth. That's tonight's show. Have a great night, everybody, and we will be back. Hope to see you then. Good night, everybody.